We're ready to begin part one of our course on the book of Revelation. And this particular part or segment of our course is going to be oriented around introductory questions. As much as it would be great to dive right in with the first verse and start asking questions of interpretation and application, there are some important questions that we have to ask ahead of time. And if I could put it very simply, we have to answer the question, what is it that we're actually dealing with? And that may seem like a very simple question. As you'll see, though, it's not quite that easy. So in this first episode, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to be right up front and tell you what my assumptions are and what the purpose behind the way in which I approach the book of Revelation is. There's nothing worse than listening to someone give you their opinion or their interpretation of something and you're not really sure what the background assumptions are. And I want to be very clear that there are certain things that I believe about the book of Revelation that really shape and frame the way in which we will approach this session. So this is a little bit about the purpose and the rationale and the assumptions. The first thing that I'd like to do is help us to reclaim the book of Revelation as Christian scripture. That's going to sound strange to some to hear me say that, but it's not a given. We can't take for granted that everyone knows how to read Revelation as Christian scripture. So I want you to take a moment, and if you'd like, you can even pause the video at this point and just reflect on what the typical postures or responses to Revelation are that you're familiar with. All right? Just give that a thought for a moment. If you're anything like me, you've probably noticed that people have one of two reactions or approaches to the book of Revelation. They either don't know what to do with it, and so they run from it as fast as they can, and they run to the safety of other places in Scripture that seem more natural or easy to interpret. Or, and you may have experienced this as well, there are some people for whom the book of Revelation is the capstone, the pinnacle, the climax. There's nothing better than it in the Bible, and so they gravitate to and focus almost exclusively on that text. And I would suggest to us in this course that both of those responses are ultimately not redemptive or helpful for the way in which we read this text. I don't think anybody should be afraid of any corner of Christian Scripture. On the other hand, I think it's all of Scripture that helps reveal to us who God is, how His kingdom is enacted and expressed by His Son Jesus, and the way in which the Spirit makes all of that real and accessible to us. So I don't want us to get overly focused on the text or feel like we have to run from it. I think that there's a better way. And perhaps the way in which we should start then is to know what we mean by the word prophecy. Because you're going to hear a lot in this course about the book of Revelation as apocalyptic literature, as apocalyptic visions, and the word apocalypse or apocalyptic means a lot of things to a lot of people, especially if you're a regular attender of thrill and horror movies in our culture. But the author himself called the book of Revelation a work of prophecy. So what is prophecy? I'm going to suggest, at least to begin, that we slightly shift our understanding of what prophecy is from a focus on prophecy as foretelling, in other words, somehow predicting what's going to happen, and understanding it much more as forthtelling. In other words, speaking something, perhaps even naming or calling something for what it is that may well already exist. And one of the ways in which I want to illustrate this for you is to read the following quote from a book called Reverse Thunder by author Eugene Peterson. And here's how he describes how biblical prophecy functions. He says the following: "The prophet says that God is speaking now, not yesterday. God is speaking now, not tomorrow. It is not a past word that can be analyzed and then walked away from. It is not a future word that can be fantasized into escapist diversion. The prophetic word eliminates the distance between God speaking and our hearing. If we make the prophetic word a predictive word, we are procrastinating." Think about that for a moment. We're putting distance between ourselves and the application of the word, putting off dealing with it until some future date. He finally says there are some predictive elements in some